The BBC News now on BBC One with Huw Edwards and Riz Latif.
Tonight at 10, after 13 years in power, Labour declares it's still the party of the future. This is the manifesto which Gordon Brown hopes will deliver his party a fourth consecutive term in government. He claims it's a plan for national renewal, with a promise not to raise income tax, but no similar promise on VAT.
Yes, we are in the future business. We are building a future fair for all. Thank you very much.
We'll be asking what kind of effect the manifestos are likely to have on voting. Also tonight, widespread criticism as 3 Labour MPs facing trial for expenses fraud are granted legal aid.
What a complete outrage that people who wouldn't even stand in the dock and answer the charges now expect all of you to pay for their legal defence.
Minutes after Northern Ireland gets its own policing and justice powers, the real IRA explodes a car bomb in County Down.
Houston, we've had a problem.
And 40 years on, we look back at the turbulent events of the Apollo 13 mission.
On BBC London, the damning report revealing the full extent of Great Ormond Street's failings over the death of baby Peter, a report that until now many never knew existed.
Good evening. Gordon Brown has unveiled the manifesto which is designed to give Labour a fourth consecutive term in government. He called it a plan for national renewal, promising to rebuild the economy and restore trust in politics. It drew the same response from Conservatives and Liberal Democrats alike. They both accused Labour of 13 years of broken promises. Our political editor, Nick Robinson, has this report.
Never before has Gordon Brown had to sell himself to the British people. It may be 13 years since he moved into Downing Street. It may be a fourth term in office that Labour are asking for. But this is the first time that he has needed your vote to be Prime Minister. Today, Labour launched their manifesto in a brand new hospital, due to open any week soon, in Birmingham. His message, simple. I may be proud of what we've achieved so far, but I'm thinking not about the past, but the future.
We are in the future business. And under my leadership, we will always be in the future business, building a future fair for all.
His manifesto is deliberately long and detailed. Evidence, the Prime Minister said, that Labour had a programme and not just what he derided as an empty slogan promising change. Promising a new industrial revolution to create skilled jobs, the leader of what we used to call the People's Party seems to want us all to be middle class now.
It's a Britain where we have more homeowners, more students, more apprentices, more professionals, more businesses, and a bigger middle class than ever before.
For the millions who'll never read the manifesto, Labour have produced on the internet a bite-sized cartoon version of what it'll mean for a typical family.
And their 3 kids, Jack, James and Jill.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. Hi.
It doesn't mention the deficit, and it and the manifesto don't spell out any spending cuts.
Doesn't every Jack, James and Jill, every Tom, Dick and Harry know that the future involves government doing less and spending less?
The government, he insisted, had spelt out how it could cut borrowing but still increase spending on public services.
I have to say to you that we have set out very, very detailed plans, but within these plans, we are able to maintain and promote and advance and improve our frontline hospital services, our frontline schools and our frontline police.
Labour, he said, would not increase income tax rates, even though they've now broken a similar promise made at the last election. And despite repeated questions, he refused to rule out a VAT increase, a promise the Chancellor says would be irresponsible to give.
Let's be honest, there aren't that many people who are actually going to get round to reading this or indeed any party manifesto. So Labour have decided to adopt the language of the high street, offering voters guarantees of what they can expect from public services and the right to kick their management out if they don't deliver. In schools, Labour saying that if any child falls behind, they'll get one-to-one tuition, and if the school's the problem, the parents can have a ballot to kick out the people running it.
They say poorly performing police forces will be taken over by neighbouring forces. On the NHS, Labour is saying that they would guarantee a maximum 18 weeks waiting time. And if the NHS can't deliver, you'll be paid to go private instead. Promises that won't impress Gordon Brown's opponents, who are circling on the road outside. They want you to focus not on what he says he'll do, but what they say he has done since the country first voted Labour. David Cameron was campaigning in Loughborough today. Tomorrow, he will launch his manifesto.
There's nothing new there. There's nothing different there. There's no real change there. And we've got a great opportunity tomorrow when we launch our manifesto to show how we're going to be different and how we would make a difference.
The Liberal Democrats' turn to set out their plans comes on Wednesday.
They promised fairness and new politics in the last election, 2005. They're doing it again. If they haven't managed to do it in 13 years, why on earth would anyone believe that they're going to be able to do it this time?
Today, Labour supporters lined up to have their manifestos signed by Gordon Brown. In a few weeks' time, it'll either be a reminder of promises you can try and hold him to, or a memento of ideas the country has rejected. Nick Robinson, BBC News, Birmingham.
Now, as well as the commitment not to raise any of the rates of income tax, other measures in Labour's manifesto today included the following: a doubling of paternity leave to 4 weeks, a so-called toddler tax credit valued at £4 a week extra for families with 1- and 2-year-olds, family intervention projects to tackle antisocial behaviour with financial support for victims, compulsory English language tests for public sector migrant workers, and they'll apply to jobs involving contact with the public, and a pledge not to extend VAT to food and children's clothing, though as we heard there in Nick's piece, there was no commitment not to raise VAT. Well, Labour launched its manifesto with that pledge to secure the economic recovery and to be restless and relentless reformers of public services. But to what extent do the party manifestos influence the final result of the election? Our special correspondent Richard Bilton has spent the day talking to people in Telford in Shropshire.
In Ironbridge today, they were remarking the lines. Conservatives hope in a few weeks' time there'll be a bit of political repainting around here as well. Because Ironbridge sits in the constituency of Telford, a red splodge in a sea of blue in the North West Midlands.
So this manifesto is Labour's pitch to hang on to this seat and to stay in government, but how can we test it? Well, we're always hearing politicians saying what I'm hearing on the doorstep. So let's do our own doorstep challenge. On the basic level of trust with the manifesto, what's your view? Does it carry some weight? It's meant to.
Absolutely none. None whatsoever. You've got to look at each party, you've got to listen to them carefully, what they're saying.
Do you trust it? Is it important to you?
I think it's interesting to read through, or whether or not it's factual is another matter.
In fact, I didn't find much trust in politics generally. But this is a constituency defined by its youth. A big and growing population of those under 16. So what did families down at the bowling alley make of a manifesto that's about future plans?
Better the party you know than the one that you don't, I suppose, because I would rather trust the people I know than anyone new coming in.
God help us, if that's the South. If that's their theme, I think it's hopeless. These will be paying for it when they've got grandchildren.
I'm coming round to the belief that a hung parliament might be best for us because they don't seem to be any different across the parties.
What we heard today was an odd mix. People do want to know what politicians stand for, but they seem to believe little of what's being said. Richard Bilton, BBC News, Telford.
Well, tonight our political editor Nick Robinson is back from his travels. He's in Downing Street. Nick, what did you make of the Labour launch and the manifesto itself?
Well, the intriguing thing is this, Huw, that when you're calling for national renewal, as Gordon Brown was today, you know you've got a problem, because after all, you've been in office for 13 years, you're calling for a fourth term in office. So how do you do that in a way that doesn't simply invite people to say, I tell you, the best way for national renewal, you get out, we'll let someone else do the job instead. And the way that the Prime Minister chose to do that was to say that the crises that the country's faced whether political or economic, generated the need for a new approach that he and he alone could deliver. So on the economy, he was arguing that the crisis there meant that you needed a more active role for government than Labour would ever have contemplated in the last 13 years, with government working with businesses to create new jobs. On the political crisis, he had to admit that they really hadn't done very much about their previous promises on voting reform or House of Lords, but suggested that this crisis meant that they would now do it, given a second chance. It's easy to be cynical about manifestos. There are broken promises in them, Huw. There are also things that are never foreseen, the economic crisis itself, the expenses crisis. But they do give you a sort of rough guide as to what the parties would hope to do given the chance. And we've got a real flavour of that from Labour today.
Well, we also got a real flavour of some of the response from the Conservatives. We'll get a stronger flavour tomorrow.
Yes, we get the full works at Battersea Power Station tomorrow. And tonight an intriguing hint has been projected onto the side of that power station to give people a sense of the philosophy underlying it. Who's the new member of the Cameron team is the question you see projected. The answer, before you think it's some great defection, is in fact you. The question the Tories are suggesting is that they need members of the public to join in the government of Britain to make it better. And that's why this is roughly what the Tory manifesto will look like. Invitation to join the government of Britain, it says there on this rather stark, rather plain document. A big book, we're told, of 150 pages of detail. But the philosophy underlying it is it is only if people participate themselves that things will get better. So there'll be an invitation to be your own boss with help to do that, to run your own school, to vote for the people who run your police force, for example, or to veto a council tax rise from the referendum. And it leaves us at the end of the next 2 days, I think, with a stark choice, with Labour saying that the crises of recent years have shown the role for government, and with David Cameron arguing tomorrow government needs to pull back to allow you to do more.
Nick, we'll talk again. Thank you very much. Nick Robinson there in Downing Street. Now, 3 former Labour MPs charged with criminal offences in relation to abuses of parliamentary expenses have won the right to have their legal fees paid by the taxpayer. The former MPs were granted legal aid by administrators at Southwark Crown Court. The Conservative leader, David Cameron, said the decision was an outrage. But tonight, Labour has accused him of hypocrisy. Our political correspondent, Richa Chakrabarti, has the story.
Where's my money gone? When Jim Devine, David Chater and Elliot Morley emerged from their first court appearance last month, the interest in them was intense. The 3 men were all accused of making dishonest expenses claims relating to mortgage applications, rent and invoices for cleaning and IT. Today it's emerged that the taxpayer will be picking up their legal bill. The Tory leader turned their claim into an election issue, saying he'd changed the rules.
People who wouldn't even stand in the dock and answer the charges now expect all of you to pay for their legal defence. Well, I can tell you something. We're having a review of legal aid under a Conservative government. You can't preview and prejudice every part of that review, but I can tell you what, there won't be legal aid available for members of Parliament who are accused of fiddling their expenses.
In fact, the rules are being changed by the government. Until now, anyone at risk of going to prison if convicted could get legal aid. That's gradually being changed for a means-tested system. But here at Southwark Crown Court, where the politicians are being tried, that scheme isn't yet up and running.
Mr Brown, should these MPs get legal aid, Mr Brown?
It wasn't a question Gordon Brown was stopping to answer. The former MP's legal aid claim, bang in the middle of an election campaign, is just embarrassing. But the Justice Secretary went on the offensive, accusing the Tories of hypocrisy.
Mr Cameron says one thing in front of the cameras, but his own people, as it were, off camera, have said and have acted in a very different way. I'm in favour of Mr Cameron now saying he's backing our changes to introduce means testing.
The Tories deny opposing means testing, but with the Liberal Democrats adding their voices to criticism of the government, the expenses affair has suddenly erupted again. The MPs may have gone, but the fallout from the scandal continues to dog the political world. Rita Chakrabarti, BBC News, Westminster.